Welcome back to A Shark's Perspective. So, if you're working today, then there is a pretty good chance that your brand is working with an agency of some sorts, especially on the branding and creative side. But for a lot of people, the entire model of the full service agency is considered to be broken. So, how do you take all the tentacles off of you and then rebuild a better relationship that better serves you? Leigh George is the CEO of Find Freedom, a strategic branding and marketing agency. She has a Ph.D. in branding history and theory, and she's a subject matter expert on marketing strategy and agency relationships. And on this episode, we'll discuss how to design a better relationship with an agency, the brand's part in all of this, looking at yourself as a marketer versus being a project manager, and a lot more. So let's tune in to an agency expert with an expert shark on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. Leigh, thank you so much for joining us today on A Shark's Perspective. If you would, tell us a little bit about your career journey to date.
Sure. So I started actually in academia. I have a Ph.D. in branding, and then I went on to work at branding and marketing and digital agencies for roughly the last 20 years, from all in the DC area, from small boutique agencies to global firms like Olivie. And I got to a point where I really felt that the agency model was broken. So I launched my own company called Freedom, which I call a branding and marketing unagency. And the goal, as the name suggests, is really to provide an alternative to clients where they can escape the billable hour, they can have more flexible solutions and a more collaborative approach to their problem solving.
So why do you say that the agency model is broken? Well, are you specifically talking about the branding and creative, or all parts of working with agencies as a whole?
I think the business model itself is broken in a lot of different ways. So the billable hour, everyone hates it. It makes it really difficult to create a relationship because you're constantly having to nickel and dime your client. This idea of full service, where you're just going to presume that you know what the solution is and kind of present an organization with essentially a fixed menu to choose from, rather than really listening to them and kind of figuring out what their challenge is and developing a solution from there. The lack of collaboration, I always felt, I was on the agency side, so in many ways I'm saying this about kind of what I was involved with, but it comes, when you kind of look at it from the outside, it comes across as very paternalistic, this idea that you're going to come into a company and kind of pat the client on the head and say, we know what's right, we're going to go away and think our brilliant thoughts and come back with the answer. It's kind of ridiculous. And it really discounts the wealth of institutional knowledge and understanding of the client's business, their customers or members or clients. And and I think too, because of the bureaucracy, a lot of these, there seems to be this constant push in agencies to kind of get bigger, to either acquire or to sell to someone else. And so really their emphasis is not on their clients, it's on their own growth.
100%.
And so I wasn't happy as an employee. It didn't match what my goals were, how I like to work with clients. I actually found, when I was kind of reflecting on this and before I launched my company, I realized my closest friendships were with my clients. So I'm actually closer to a lot of my clients than I ever was my coworkers. I was like, well, that's kind of odd. It served me well, that I was my own company. But so before launching, I picked up the phone and I called some people that I had worked with who had been clients and said, I have this idea. What do you think of this different kind of model and approach? And they were just like, yes, that annoys me so much. So I kind of did a little experimentation and testing first, testing out the idea, and because I got such a response, launched and actually just celebrated my 4th anniversary.
That's great. So I agree with you. I remember being honestly in an uncomfortable position when I was billable to a client by the hour and had to remind them that the time was billable, and they
Right.
just wanted to touch base and be friends. And there was a
Right.
lot of things
Right.
I didn't bill them for, but at some point, just like if you're a solopreneur, you got to make money to live, and agencies and consulting firms will judge you on that or how it's built in beforehand, and that's uncomfortable to have that conversation with people that are basically friends. And there's only so much you can do and write off. If you had a magic wand and could fix whatever you wanted to, how would you go about restructuring that to to focus more on a solution?
Well, I mean, I can tell you what I do, which is I have a flat cost.
Mm-hmm.
So I meet with a company, and we talk about what their problems are and what their challenges are. You know, kind of the same process that typically I think agencies go through, and then I um, create my proposal is not kind of this templated approach. Although I don't start from scratch each time because I focus on branding and marketing strategy, but I develop an approach that meets their needs because every organization is different. There's political situations within the organization that you have
Oh
to
yeah.
be sensitive to, right? And so I feel like agencies are never planning for those things. It was just like, this is our process, this is our approach, take it or leave it. And I know that for my plan to be successful, I have to take into account everything that's going on internally at the company as well as whatever external pressures they have. So really getting to kind of understand what's going on, creating options for them to choose from. So the options range in cost and time so that they can pick what works best for them and their resources and their priorities. Um, and and then also what I've done is, because I recognize that never in the history of projects has anything ever gone according to plan. Never, ever, ever, ever. And, agency basically just take advantage of that because the second something doesn't go according to plan, which we all know is going to happen, they start charging you for those things, calling them change orders, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what I say to clients is, look, I know things are going to change because we live in a world where that happens, and I can accommodate that. I can pivot, I can change, as long as we're not working on a completely different business problem,
Yeah.
right? But within the kind of realm of what we're working on, if you need me to do X instead of Y, I am happy to do that without writing a whole new proposal and figuring all that stuff out. In fact, I had a situation where I was working with an organization, and my immediate client, the head of marketing, left in the middle of the
Right.
project.
Sure.
And of course, no one else there knew what was going on. And so what an agency would have done would have said, oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
We now have to completely rescope this. And by the way, it's going to be X times more expensive. But I looked at the situation and I said, these people are incredibly stressed out. They have a looming deadline. No one knows what's going on. They need help. They don't need, they need someone that's sensitive to these problems. And so I said, I am in here with you. This is, here's the scope I had agreed to with her. Based on what I think you need between now and then, this is what I suggest to do within the scope. And it was wonderful. And I think you just don't, that's a great example of kind of why I founded my company, because I just don't think agencies can do that. They're not set up to do that in a lot of ways because of the billable hour. The other thing with the billable hour that was amazing to me, so because I don't use the billable hour, I save probably like 3 hours a day because I'm not tracking my time. I'm not having to reconcile budgets. I'm not. It is fantastic, and you realize what a total waste of time and energy it is. So it releases this extra time that I can focus now on my clients and on helping them, as opposed to basically paperwork.
Couldn't agree more. And when thinking about a brand may know what their problem is, and they may understand that it's going to require this number of hours from this agency and this number of hours from this agency after they get the pitch from the two agencies. What they can't anticipate is the other issues that come up either internally or what agency 3 or 4 that's part of this mix may alter and change because they didn't think of that, and it
Right.
it just becomes a never-ending problem, or a never-ending solution to a constant problem that they didn't scope out well. And at least with technology, if it's a line of code or something, mathematically to some degree, you can generally fix that kind of problem. With a brand creative piece, a lot of it can get out and spiral out of control way too quickly, and then it's still creating a problem. And something you said that I'm wondering if you're seeing the same thing, being more nimble in the role you're in now with starting this agency, is so little of that attention that I have a problem with agencies. And granted, I work for one now, but it's a different, it's in the performance field. Is that very few solutions that come from agencies are ever truly focused on the customer itself. And while it may be focused on their customer, which they think of as the brand, that brand answers to a higher power, which is not just a C-suite. It's Joe and Sally customer, who really are the ones saying, this is a problem, I need your help fixing it. So
And,
go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's very true. Before we turn our conversation to that, one other thing I wanted to talk about in terms of billable hour, I think the reason why agencies like billable hour so much is it incentivizes them to take as long as possible, right? Because if they're working on the billable hour, the client never really knows how much it's going to cost, because there are these, oh, well, this came up, okay, that's going to take this much more time. Whereas when you have a flat fee, you're incentivized to finish it as fast as possible, right? To kind of wrap up work as efficiently as possible.
Agreed.
So I think that's another reason why I think clients like it much better. But to go back to your point about solutions being focused on the audience. Yeah. I mean, I think the first thing I tell clients, regardless of whatever their challenge is that, so what do you know about your customers? Does this matter to them? Do you understand how they view you from their perspective? Do you understand how your business fits into their life? Do you understand what their needs are in relation to the kinds of products and services you offer? Do you understand what keeps them up at night, what they're afraid of, what their motivations are? And I'd say 99.999% of the time, they say, well, no, we have no idea. And so that's typically the starting point, is to do some kind of research to understand, to first of all, define who is it that you're marketing to, and then to understand who they are, what their needs are in relation to what you do. And I always talk about branding is happening at the intersection of your purpose as an organization and your customer's passion. There has to be a reason for them to care about what you do. And if I use this kind of metaphor of, when you're at a cocktail party, or if you're at a conference and a networking happy hour, and you're chatting with someone and all they can do is talk about themselves, how great they are, their house, their job, how much money they have, what school they went to, their car. That's what 90% of brands do. They just get up and just start talking about themselves. And I think, especially since social media, where customers have access to information and to the ability to talk back in a way that was never possible before, people are like, I don't care, right? I don't, you have to show why I should care. You have to give me a reason to care about you, because I have too many alternatives and I have too many other things going on. So if you don't understand who your customers are, what they care about, what they need, what they're afraid of, what their barriers are, all of those things, what their behaviors are, then there's no way that you're going to be able to create a brand or marketing, much less a brand that really connects with them.
Well, and to your point, you just spoke about, and as I saw it even on your own website, I love the phrase "customers are the disruptors," and I think
Right.
over time that will, even more so than just the billable hours, as a lot of this sort of nimbly gets aligned inside brands, that's going to force the changes for how agencies and brands work together as well. But when you look at how you price something out for a brand's position, which involves a lot of creative, when you don't know how long that will take you, the freedom I get, the freedom of not looking at the billable hours, could not agree more with you. And I used to hate putting in hours, but when you're trying to think of a problem and you don't know how long it's going to take you and your agency to come up with a solution, that freedom is one thing, but when you don't know how long that's going to take, how do you sort of deal with that to help scope it out? Because I think part of the part with being creative that unfortunately too many agencies have done is they've made it such a cookie cutter approach that then it loses
Hmm.
the creativity, because it's here we'll come up with something creative, but it sort of falls along the lines of this cookie cutter type solution, and that's an unhealthy thing that's put us in the position we're in today. Does that make sense?
Right. Right. Well, and I focus on, so I'm not a designer. I don't do
Right.
visual identity. So, and I believe you can't even do visual identity until you understand what the brand positioning is, what the messaging is, and what the personality is. So that's what I focus on. And I think, again, with brand, you have to be able to create your brand story or even understand your positioning. You have to understand kind of where your competitors are, what positioning they have. But then you also have to understand your audiences and what's at stake for them. And so I use a process, a collaborative workshop. So essentially, the clients are creating the brand. I'm just taking all the information they provide and consolidating it into a narrative,
Mm-hmm.
based on a structure that I use. So I think because, and I've had a client tell me that it's a very disciplined approach, but it also offers a lot of flexibility, um, that they really appreciated. So I think that's it. I think just because something is creative doesn't mean it lacks discipline. And I think that that's important to keep in mind.
Yeah.
And I think too, again, that when you think about brand, I think so many agencies go in and they kind of slap something on the table or project it and say, here's your brand. But there's no ownership on the part of the client because they didn't have any
Right.
involvement in the creation. And at the end of the day, I'm going home, right?
Yeah.
I'm leaving. I'm not, my job will be done with them. And they're the ones that are going to have to maintain the brand. They're the ones that are going to have to be the brand advocates and ambassadors. If they do not have a stake in this, if they're not involved and don't feel like they were a part of this, it's going to fail. And so that's why I think the sort of collaborative approach is essential, because when I present the brand to them, it's their words, right? I'm not making anything up. I'm taking all the information that they provided at the workshop, and again, I'm consolidating it, and putting it together in a coherent narrative that's also compelling, that starts with their audiences and ends with the impact that they help those audiences achieve. So it's a very customer-centric, model for branding.
Well, and I think one of the things that, to that point alone, I completely agree, because one thing I've found as well is internally there are a lot of smart people that work inside brands. They Not all the smart people are at agencies, although we'd love to think of
Right. Yeah.
ourselves that way. But what you often find inside brands are project managers, not marketers. And unless they are,
Yeah.
and they don't necessarily understand enough of being a marketer or what it's like to work with the diva marketers that we all are. And that can become an issue if you are trying to drive a lot of creative. So unless you are some phenomenal PM who knows how to wrangle all of the cats that needed to be heard, that need to be herded, it becomes very difficult to stay aligned with what your initial mission was. So, to that point, one of the things that I've seen in my own experience as well is you've got a lot of large brands who work with a lot of agencies. There are a lot of internal teams that aren't aligned, and so much of it becomes siloed and often in the wrong,
Right.
In other directions. As you found yourself in that position with ultimately thinking about the customer, and whether it's the brand itself or that brand's customers, but how do you help keep an agency, even when you were at Ogilvy or where you are now, how do you keep it aligned as your part as an agency? Do you see it where you're able to help herd all the cats together as well? Because ultimately you've got to deliver a solution to that problem that the brand presented to you in the first place. And unfortunately,
Right.
when you get 20 teams, internal and external, moving in a lot of different directions, and the biggest concern is the billable hour, well, then the solution can be, you can start off with ABC and end up with rubber baby buggy bumper.
Right, right. Well, I think I'm fortunate too that I have yet to find myself in a situation where I am one of, 5 different or 10 different agencies. I have been in situations where there are a few others, but we kind of have, the client's been really good about, they give different agencies different lanes, right? We're kind of doing different things. But I think one thing I have found is, agencies assume that they can kind of just go in, blow everything up, and start from scratch.
Exactly.
Or that they're like somehow operating in this ideal, perfect world. And,
right.
And what I'm realizing is like, no, of course not. But it's, there are groups that aren't communicating. There's no collaboration internally. Everyone's not on the same page. And so whoever in the organization brings me in, we have real heart to heart so that I understand kind of what's going on, and that we can kind of say, okay, we know ideally we would like X to happen, that's a huge problem. However, realistically, the only person that's going to be able to move that is like in the C-suite, or, just a little bit below there. So based on what we can do, what we do have control over, this is where we'll start. And then see if we can, get the attention of others in the organization, because we've been so successful that they'll want to adopt us too, or something like that. So I want my client to be the hero,
yes.
Because these in-house marketers, I don't know how they do it. They're in meetings all day long,
all the time.
They're constantly having to justify their existence to everybody else.
Yeah.
Everybody wants something from them.
And then you got to go herd the agencies.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, I was going to say, I was just going to say, besides herding the agencies and all the meetings that you have internally, that's not even counting the pressure that the brand marketer gets from his C-suite to justify it. So you're spot on.
Right. Yeah. So to me, I approach them as, this is a human being under a lot of stress who's exhausted, because I've yet to meet an in-house marketer who does not fit that description. So I'm like, what can I do? How can I help? I am not interested in winning awards I find all of that just to be silly. I think kind of awards and that kind of stuff is just silly. It's not, I have yet to see an award. There's very few awards that are given because of the effectiveness of a campaign. It's usually just about the aesthetics of the creative. So, I want to be recognized by the client who says, you saved my ass.
Right.
You allowed me to, go home in a decent hour. Or that to me is the reward. So I feel like I'm much more kind of roll up the sleeves. I want to look under the hood, see what they're struggling with. And even if it's kind of small wins, how can I make their lives easier? What can we do? It's not, so many agencies, it's about the big kind of showy bluster. And realistically, that's not what these in-house marketers' lives are like. And really, they're your clients. You're there to help them make their lives better, make them more effective, make them look better to their bosses. Um,
Yeah,
so that's I view my goal.
as good as that sounds, when I was on the brand side, an award-winning agency never helped me fix my problem. There was nothing about their
Yeah,
award
yeah,
that ever led to me being able to
right,
fix my problem. So,
exactly. And I mean, I meet clients who it's kind of like no one ever got fired for hiring IBM,
right.
who are, are conservative and say, oh no, we've got to have the big agency. And then I've had them come around, like end up having to fire the agency, and they come back and say,
Yeah.
oh, Leigh, we made a mistake. So, and I'm seeing that actually more and more of clients and brands just like, I cannot put up with this 1 minute longer. I just can't do this anymore. And they're looking at alternatives. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see. I mean, I don't think that, I think IBM is always going to hire a multinational global agency because they complement each other. But I think more and more brands are just like, look, I can't just throw money around without getting any sort of, you know, return on this. I mean, P&G, just the amount that they've cut back on their agencies, I'm shocked it took them this long.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a huge conglomerate. So I think it'll be really interesting to see what happens with these agencies and how long clients continue to tolerate that model.
So as the model evolves, and as you position your own self, with what you're doing at your company now with Freedom, where do you see the best place for an agency to fix problems for brands? Is it by channel? Is it by problem? When you sort of start thinking about those, swim lanes for you and for your company,
Mm-hmm.
and what you've seen in the market, where do you see the agency solution being the best solution for someone? Because I do also get worried when brands who think they can do it and really aren't equipped to do it long term as well. Because you do see a lot of people start to pull in stuff in house, and then it doesn't do
Right.
well, and they're stuck with it because it's a lot easier to fire an agency than it is a group of employees and then go outsource it again.
Right. I mean, I never thought in terms of kind of where can agencies be most successful, because I'm not kind of in that business anymore,
Yeah.
so to speak. I think I focus on branding and marketing strategy, one, because that's my passion. But I also truly believe you can't even begin to look at channel or even content type until you know your audience and what their behavior is. So there's no scenario for me in which channel first marketing makes any sense. Because then you're just constantly kind of running after the shiny object. It's really about understanding who your customers are, understanding at each stage in their relationship with you what they need, what their behaviors are, and then serving up the messages in the content types on the channels that make the most sense for that audience. So and that's exactly when I put together marketing strategies, they're very customer centric. They don't start with the brand and what the brand wants to do. They start with, okay, who's the audience? At what stage are they? At that stage, what are their needs? What are the barriers? What are the motivations? And then based on that, identify what are the messages that we have to send, in what types of content types do we need to send those messages, and then on what channels does that content need to appear.
Agreed. Well, we see so many people that, especially in the MarTech field, you see a lot of MarTech consultants emerging. I've worked a lot in
Right.
MarTech.
Oh my God, yeah.
And they've sprouted up everywhere, but there's a lot of nimbleness that they do because generally it's one person or a small consulting firm. They're not massive agencies generally. And then they can provide a nimble approach to a client solutions. With branding, so many people because it's kind of like your IBM example. They fear that if they don't go with some big agency, they're going to, push themselves
Right.
in, and then it creates, like, there are a lot of great large agencies, but I don't know how large agencies like Aegis and WPP and
Right.
Publicis and all these, massive agencies are going to fix this problem when they've gotten so large as a business. It becomes, IPG as well. It becomes so difficult to be nimble again, which is what you've got to be in the market, and not overly focused on that billable hour, or not necessarily billable hour, but it could be some variance of that becomes too complex or too expensive to fix the problem. And at some point, I almost see us going back to where it's the individual or a much smaller team building these out to have more nimble solutions. Because, if you took some of the brightest minds out of any agency and stuck them in a smaller team, they'd still be the brightest minds just at a smaller agency. You don't have to always have a 5,000 people or hundreds of people at an agency to be a good agency.
Right.
They can be smaller, down to 1 to 10 to be great agencies.
So part of the problem too, in terms of a difficulty in being nimble, is that they're so focused on perfection.
Yeah.
Right. That's deliverable. The deliverable has to be perfect. And there's a lot of ego involved, and that's why. That's what's driving that perfection. Because I experienced it in agencies. And, in my own company, what I realized is, like, this is not about me, right? This is not about me. This is not my client.
Right.
And I am not going to sit there and, like, struggle if I don't have the answer. So what I do is I tend to do these kind of week-long sprints. So we'll meet with the client. They'll give me information. We'll talk. I will work on, whatever it is for a week, and then I will show it to them. And I'll say, tear this apart. What did I miss? What did I get wrong? And together it's great because it's not about who's right or who's wrong. It's like, is this what the customer will respond to? So we're all sharing the same focus. The egos are out the window. And then we do that like a series of 2 or 3 times. And then we're like, okay, this is good enough. Does not need to be perfect. Let's get it out and get some feedback. So whether that goes in, if that messaging goes into email or social media or website or whatever it is, we're not going to sit here and like hem and haw over every period and comma. And the point is we need to get this good enough to get out so that customers can respond to it and we can understand, is this working or is this not? And I'm a huge fan of design thinking and that approach that has the customer at the center, and then you prototype and you test it, and then the goal is not perfection. It's essentially endless testing, right? You're constantly kind of refining because people's behavior is changing all the time. So I just think that's such a more productive way to work than this notion of, I'm the brilliant one. I'm going to go away, come up with this perfect deliverable, and then it's going to be perfect. It's going to be finished.
Agreed.
Because nothing about the world does that make sense with.
Leigh, you're in the land of a lot of political sharks in D.C. I don't ever recall seeing any in the Lincoln Memorial Reflecting Pool or the Tidal Basin, but what is your favorite kind of shark and why?
Oh my gosh. I should have prepared for this, shouldn't I?
Well,
I will say, I guess I love shark advocacy. So I follow January Jones on Instagram. She's an actress that was in Mad Men, tying it back to advertising. And she is a huge shark advocate. So I think she's actually testified on Capitol Hill about the protection of sharks. So I will say that is my favorite, is the shark advocate.
Anybody that's a shark advocate, that is an outstanding answer and one I wholeheartedly agree with. So, Leigh, it is a special time in the show. Also, as a shark advocate, are you ready for the 5 most interesting and important questions that you're going to be asked today?
I hope so. I guess I don't have a choice.
All right, here we go. Number 1, the Smithsonian National Museum of American History or Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum?
Oh, can I pick a different Smithsonian museum, or do I have to pick between those two?
Pick between those two.
I will say natural history.
Number 2, you spoke at the Girl Scouts National Convention, so let's talk a little bit about cookies. Thin Mints or Tagalongs, the peanut butter patties?
Oh, Thin Mints, definitely.
Okay, nice. Number 3, Sarah Lawrence College or Binghamton University?
I'm going to have to go with Sarah Lawrence.
Really?
It's a pretty special place, yeah.
It is, but branding
no,
history and theory Ph.D. is pretty awesome as well.
That's true. Yeah, I just think the culture at Sarah Lawrence is pretty unique. You don't find that. It's, Binghamton is a big state university. The program I was in for my Ph.D. was very unusual. But Sarah Lawrence is very, very unique, and there's not many schools like it around.
Good. So number 4 is, you've also talked about this earlier, but with chocolate. But we'll go Ghirardelli or Hershey's.
Oh man, now that's not a fair choice. I think
at least I didn't say Godiva.
This is a much longer answer than you probably wanted, but I love dark chocolate. That's like my go-to.
Okay.
But I love, so like I've never visited the Ghirardelli factory in San Francisco or anything like that, but Hershey World is very close by to where I live.
Yeah.
And I just love the whimsy and the history of Hershey. So I'm going to say Hershey.
Number 5, and the most important question that you're going to be asked today, the one that has puzzled people for ages, is biscuits or cornbread?
Oh, man. I'm from the South, so that's a really hard choice. But I'm going to have to go with biscuits. Yeah, okay. I'm going to have to go with biscuits.
Well, Leigh, it's a good answer. Where can people find out more about you, follow your thought leadership, learn more about the agency, watch you at a conference, and more?
Yeah, so they can do that via my website, which is find-freedom.co. They can also learn more about me on my LinkedIn page. So just search for Leigh George and you'll find me.
Well, Leigh, it's been a real pleasure, and I very much thank you for being with us today on A Shark's Perspective.
No, this was a great conversation. Thanks for having me.
So there was my conversation with Leigh George, the CEO of Find Freedom, a strategic branding and marketing agency. She has a Ph.D. in branding history and theory, and she's a subject matter expert on marketing strategy and agency relationships. Let's take a look at 3 key takeaways from my conversation with her. First, we have a predicament. An agency is focused on growing itself into a bigger company. And while there is an obvious focus on their customers and clients, the focus tends to shift on building the agency's business more than on improving the service to all clients. It's a problem that a lot of agency and consulting firm owners run into daily. You were strong in your field and started a company to help other companies, and then payroll and hiring and meeting and attracting new business and everything else just happened. And then more junior people started to work on those accounts. And another problem with that is that it continues to create a distance, if you will, between you and your client's actual customer and consumer. I've never seen an agency owner, and I'm talking about a decent sized agency, not a small group, but I've never seen an agency owner say, we have too much business and too much money. We should stop growing. We don't want the new tech, or we don't want to hire any more people or get faster or reduce our rates, for economies of scale or something like that. And if it happens and sustains, times, then it's so rare that most of us will never see it. So all of this is simply creating tension and a greater distance between the brand and its customers with how the agency serves all of these parties. And I've been on both the agency and brand side a lot in my career, and this is just simply a big problem that I see over and over and over again. Agencies must solve this, or they become a hindrance to their clients. And I will tell you that in a heartbeat, if you're a full service agency working with a client and you become that hindrance, then you should absolutely be replaced. Brands should never be the ones who are basically working for the agency, waiting on them to deliver late or give a bigger bill. Second, the billable hour is horrible. It is easy to understand the need to cookie cutter with this approach and keep track of your hours this way, but that doesn't necessarily make it a good solution. Brands aren't hiring lawyers, so don't waste time nickel and diming a client. There are other ways to solve and look at this kind of problem. Price the solution to the problem and not how long it takes you to complete, since there will be a lot of changes and pivots along the way. And the discussion you have with senior leadership at a brand on cost, agencies should also have that exact same discussion with everyone else on that internal team. When a senior director or a CMO strikes a deal with a head of an agency on pricing, and then the people on the ground doing the actual work don't understand why there is a delay or a bigger bill or understand the bigger picture, then that's a problem. And like Leigh said, never in the history of projects has everything gone exactly to plan. Things will change because we live in a world where that just happens. So you either need to get better at scoping, better at project management, better at delivering on promises, and just being on time. Third, in my opinion, the shoulder of responsibility for where we are with this broken state of the full service agencies also falls just as heavily on brands. The actual clients are just as guilty of this, if not more. Never let a third party, especially not a full service agency, condition your business into a comfortable relationship that doesn't help you achieve your goals when you need to achieve them. The agencies work for you and not the other way around. Agencies can be an amazing resource to get more done than you or your internal team may get done on their own. However, if you treat them like an extension of your team to the point that you've forgotten, there's a separate cost for them that should be minimized and that you should be managing a lot more closely. If you're not doing that, then shame on you. The CMO may look at it as an extension of your team, but to the CFO, your agency partner is still a vendor. So manage the costs better by actually doing your job as the project and vendor manager for those agencies. After all, you're the client. Got a question? Send me an email to kenneth@asharksperspective.com. Thank you for the privilege of your time. And as Tony Robbins said, the path to success is to take massive, determined action. So take that action and join us on the next episode of A Shark's Perspective.